Hi, ma'am.
So, I guess we already in our last class we have discussed about linkage, recombination, those things that were related to genetics and their effect on evolutionary studies. So, I have already talked about this difference between linkage and recombination, that there is a difference between these two terms. So, I guess you can answer me now that what is the difference between linkage and recombination, how they are different from each other. I have already discussed it in the last class, so I wish to hear the difference from any one of you.
Ma'am,
Yes.
in linkage, two or more genes are linked together and always inherited together in the same combination, one or more than two generation.
Yeah.
And in recombination, the genetic material is exchanged between different organisms, which leads to the production of offspring with a combination of different strains.
Good. So, in our last class, actually, we have discussed the effects or about this linkage and recombination process, how they actually control, or how they what you can say, how they can control the effects of evolution and all. Today we will discuss about the population genetics section. Okay, so before going into population genetics, we will start with a new term which is known as linkage disequilibrium. So let's start. So this is the slide which I showed you in our last class, showing the recombination frequency and linkage map and all. And now we will introducing a new term, linkage disequilibrium. Now this linkage disequilibrium, this is a very popular term in population genetics. This is basically, you can define this as the non-random association of alleles at different loci in a given population, and loci are said to be in linkage disequilibrium when the frequency of this association of their different alleles is higher or lower than what would be the expected. What is the threshold? If the loci were independent and associated randomly, so this linkage disequilibrium basically that may exist between alleles at different loci without any genetic linkage between them and independently of whether or not the allele frequencies are in equilibrium. Okay, say suppose you can say that among the gametes that were found, so this is the you can term this linkage disequilibrium, that non-random association of alleles at different loci in a given population. So what you can say, suppose the among the gametes that are formed in a sexually reproducing population, say allele A occurs with a frequency of Pa at one locus, that is Pa is the proportion of gametes with A at that particular locus. At the same time, at a different locus, say allele B, it is occurring with a frequency of Pb. So similarly, let Pab be the frequency, Pab, this is the frequency with which both A and B, allele A and B occur together in the same allele. It means that this Pab, this is the frequency of the AB haplotype. So this association between the alleles A and B that can be regarded as completely random, which is known in statistics as independence, when the occurrence of one does not affect the occurrence of the other, in which case the probability that both A and B occur together is given by the product of PA, PB of the probabilities. Now there is said to be a linkage disequilibrium between the two alleles whenever PAB differs from PAB for any reason. Now the level of the linkage disequilibrium between these two alleles A and B, that can be quantified by the coefficient of linkage disequilibrium, the term DAB. I have written over here, this is the coefficient of linkage disequilibrium. This is the measure by which we can actually identify the level of linkage disequilibrium between these two alleles. So it can be defined as DAB equals to PAB subtracted by PAPB, provided that both these terms they are greater than 0, the PAB and PAPB. Now linkage disequilibrium corresponds to DAB that cannot be a 0. Okay, so in the case if DAB equals to 0, then you can see that PAB that is always equals to PAPB, and it means the alleles A and B are said to be in linkage equilibrium. Okay, so this is actually the term linkage disequilibrium that is randomly used in the population genetics section. Now this linkage disequilibrium or this LD, that I have told that this is simply a random association of alleles at 2 or more loci, and detecting this LD or linkage disequilibrium does not ensure either linkage or a lack of equilibrium. It doesn't show that. Now the quantity, the DAB, is the coefficient of linkage disequilibrium. It is defined for a specific pair of alleles. I have mentioned here two different alleles A and B, and does not depend on how many other alleles are at that two loci. Each pair of alleles had its own D value. So each pair of allele, the coefficient actually varies for each pair of alleles. Now what is the evolutionary importance of this LD in biology and human genetics? Why this LD or linkage disequilibrium? This is very, very important. So before going into that, just let me tell you that this linkage disequilibrium actually that determines the extent of, in simple words, it actually determines the extent to which association mapping can be used in a species. Say there are two kinds of linkage disequilibrium. You can actually interpret in two ways: the long distance LD and the short distance. The long distance, that is measured the mapping at the centimorgan distances, and short distances, that means mapping at base pair distances. Now this LD actually measures the degree to which the alleles at two loci they are associated, and the non-random association, I have mentioned several times that non-random association between the alleles at two loci, this is based on expectations relative to allele frequencies at two loci, and the statistical analysis, the statistical variables we use, that actually allows us to determine if two loci are in linkage equilibrium or in disequilibrium, and also the frequencies of each haplotypes that are used. These PA, PB, these are the frequencies of each allele. So the frequency of each haplotype are used, we can determine that. And to measure this linkage equilibrium, we can compare the observed and expected frequency of one haplotypes. Okay, so now I have already mentioned that if this linkage disequilibrium or D coefficient that cannot be equals to 0, and from the definitions of this D value, this D actually depends on the allelic frequency. You can actually have the formula in front of you, so you can say that the D value actually depends on the allelic frequency. And from this definition actually we can determine the relationship of the haplotype frequencies and the D and the allele frequencies. Now I was talking about what is the importance of this LD in the evolutionary biology or human genetics. Why this is so much important? Because so many factors actually affect it, and they are affected by different factors, and they can affect different factors of this evolutionary biology. Now this LD or linkage disequilibrium provides us the information about past events, and it constrains the potential response to both natural and artificial selection. LD throughout the genome reflects the population history, the breeding system, and the pattern of geographic subdivision, whereas LD in each genomic region reflects the history of natural selection, gene conversion, mutation, and other forces that cause this gene frequency evolution. So from this you can say that this LD has immense effect on this evolutionary biology. Now how these factors, this say natural selection, gene conversions, gene frequency, how these factors affect LD between a particular pair of loci or in a genomic region, that depends on the local recombination rate. Okay, so the population genetics theory of LD is well developed and is being widely used to provide the insight into evolutionary history, and this is because it can be used as the basis for mapping genes. You can use this for mapping of genes, for QTL mapping, okay, genes in humans and in other species. There are actually processes by which you can use these LD scores in order to say you can use this for association mapping in plants, like traditional QTL approach or normal association mappings, etc. So by using these LD values you can go for SNP analysis. So this is basically an important term which can be used to know the evolutionary history, not only for humans but also for other species also. So there are already, I have mentioned that say recombination, I have told about local recombination rate, because this LD of a particular between a particular pair of loci or in a genomic region, that depends on the local recombination rate. So obviously there is a question that, or I have already mentioned, that this linkage disequilibrium, there are several factors that actually have effects on linkage disequilibrium, and there are several factors that are actually controlled by this LD or linkage disequilibrium. So what are different factors that actually can cause this linkage disequilibrium? The first one we can see that recombination. So you can see in case of, I have already mentioned about this recombination. So how recombination actually affect this linkage disequilibrium? If you see that recombination actually changes the arrangement of haplotypes and also creates new haplotypes. Now the change in the haplotype, that actually has an effect on this random association of the alleles. So in other terms, recombination actually has an impact on this linkage disequilibrium. The second one is genetic drift. So genetic drift, that actually results in the change, causes the changes allele frequencies due to small population size, which is a very random effect, and the linkage disequilibrium changes depends on population size and recombination rate in case of smaller population. Okay, now new non-random association appears, larger LD values between some pairs of loci in case of larger populations, though LD has a very less effect, but in case of smaller population, due to this genetic drift, new non-random associations can appear. So you can see that there is a larger disequilibrium between some pair of loci. Third is inbreeding. Now the decay of linkage disequilibrium is delayed in selfing population. The linkage disequilibrium decay, that is delayed in case of selfing population. So because this inbreeding or selfing, that is very important for association mapping in self pollinated crops. So from this you can say that this inbreeding has also an effect on the change of this linkage disequilibrium. The third one is mutation. So the effects of the mutation, that is generally small or small absent combinations. This is not a very significant one about the effect of these mutations. And the other one is gene flow. That what happens, the LD score or these linkage disequilibrium, that becomes large if two populations intermating, they are intermating genotypically. If they are genotypically distinct, but these two populations, they are intermating. Now if the crossing between highly similar population found with most breeding programs, that is not a much problem, but in case of genotypically distinct populations intermating, that actually affects the LD or linkage disequilibrium. So these are actually different factors that actually affect the linkage disequilibrium. So the term linkage disequilibrium, I have already mentioned that this is basically a portion, or you can say that this is a very important part of population genetics. While studying the population genetics, the linkage disequilibrium, this term actually comes. So what is the population genetics? We didn't even talked about this population genetics before, right? So this population genetics basically a field of biology that studies the genetic composition of biological population and the changes in genetic composition that result from the operation of various factors like natural selection. Now these population geneticists, what they do, they actually continue the goals by developing abstract mathematical models of gene frequency dynamics. So why? Because they are trying to extract conclusions from those models about the likely patterns of genetic variations in actual population and testing the conclusions against empirical data. So there are a number of the more robust generalizations to emerge from population genetics analysis. So we will discuss about that. Now to understand how this population genetics came into being and to appreciate its intellectual significance, so let's just have an idea about this history of biology. So Darwin's Origin of Species, he published in 1859. That has two main points. First one is that the modern species were descended from common ancestors, and the second one is that the process of natural selection was the major mechanism of evolutionary change. Now the first one, that is the modern species, they are coming from a common ancestors, that was quickly accepted in the scientific community. But the second one, that the process of natural selection was a major mechanism of evolutionary change, that wasn't accepted. Okay, so it needed some explanation to prove. So Darwin was deeply troubled by not having a proper understanding of inheritance mechanism, for it left him unable to actually tell about one of the most powerful objections to his overall theory. So for a population, say, to evolve by natural selection, the members of the population must vary. If all the organisms are identical, no selection can occur. So for selection to gradually modify a population over a long period of time in the manner suggested by Darwin, a continual supply of variation was needed. Now this was the basis for Jenkins' famous objection to Darwin, namely that the available variations would be used up too fast. Now Jenkins' reasoning assumed a blending theory of inheritance. The idea of inheritance wasn't present in Darwin, but the blending theory of inheritance Jenkins produced, that is that an offspring's phenotype traits, this is basically a blend of those of its parental. Say for example, if a short and a tall organism mate, the height of the offspring will be intermediate one, that is between the two. The particular offspring is not short or not a very tall one. So Jenkins argued that if given blending inheritance, sexually reproducing population will become phenotypically homogeneous in just a few generations, far shorter than the number of generations needed for natural selection to produce complex adaptation. Now fortunately what happens, Darwin's theory of inheritance that does not actually work the way Jenkins thought. The type of inheritance that we call Mendelian after Gregor Mendel is particulate one rather than the blending. Means offspring inherit discrete hereditary particles, which we know now as genes, the discrete hereditary particles from their parents, which means that sexual reproduction does not diminish the heritable variation present in the population. So population genetics as we know it today, that actually arose from the need to reconcile Mendel with Darwin. It's a need which became increasingly urgent as the empirical evidence for Mendelian inheritance began to pile up. Now the first significant milestone was from R.A. Fisher in 1918. He told the correlation between relatives on the supposition of Mendelian inheritance, which showed how the biometrical and Mendelian research traditions could be unified. This is the first in 1918 that the biometrical and Mendelian research, they can be unified. Fisher demonstrated that if a given continuous trait, say height, was affected by a large number of Mendelian factors, each of which made a small difference to the trait, then the trait would show an approximately normal distribution in a population. So since the Darwinian process was widely believed to work best on continuously varying traits, showing that the distribution of such traits was compatible with Mendelism was an important step towards reconciling Darwin with Mendel. Now, the full reconciliation was achieved in 1920s and early 30s, and thanks to mathematical work done by Fisher, Haldane and Wright. So each of these theories, that actually these theorists developed formal models to explore how natural selection occurs and other evolutionary forces such as say mutation that can modify the genetic compositions of a Mendelian population over time. So this is basically the brief history starting from Darwin's theory of evolution, how this gradually the Mendel's theory of evolution that came, Mendelian genetics that came, and at the same time we got the idea about the inheritance pattern and the genetic the say how they are actually passed on by from the ancestor to the offsprings, which is in terms of not a blending of traits but as a discrete particle, which is a gene basically that doesn't fades away. Okay, fade away. So this is actually how this population genetics come over times, by actually mixing or by modifying the Mendelian genetics with Darwin and so on. So now if we want to study the population genetics portion, we will surely should know the Hardy-Weinberg principle. Hardy-Weinberg, actually the two scientists G.H. Hardy and W. Weinberg in 1908. So they have discovered, obviously independently, discovered one of the simplest and most important principle in population genetics. Okay, so we will talk about this Hardy-Weinberg principle. Now say if you see that to illustrate the principle, say consider a large population of sexually reproducing organisms. Now the organisms are assumed to be diploid. I guess you know what is diploid. That means that they contain two copies of each chromosome. One received from each of the parent, right? And the gametes they produce, they are haploid in nature, right? So that means that they contain only one of the each chromosome pair. Now during sexual fusion, two haploid gametes they fuse to form a diploid zygote, which then grow and develops into an adult organism. So most multi-celled animals and just 1 minute. Now say most multi-celled organism, what happens? Animals, many plants, they have this kind of a short life cycle. Okay, suppose now see that at a given locus, or say chromosomal slot, you know what is locus, a particular position. So chromosomal slot or a particular locus, there are two possible alleles. Say I have written over here A1 and A2. Okay, and the locus is assumed to be on an autosome, not in a sex chromosome. Now with respect to the locus in question, that A1 and A2, there are three possible genotypes. Okay, so what are they? Three possible genotypes from these two alleles: A1 A1, A1 A2 and A2 A2. Now if you can see that these A1 and A2, the first two, these are actually homozygotes genotype, homozygotes, and those with this A1 A2 genotype, that is said to be a heterozygote one. Now the proportions or the relative frequencies of these three genotypes of the frequency of these three genotypes in the overall population, that we can denote the frequency as FA1A2, FA2A2 and FA1A2. This is the relative frequency of this particular say genotype in overall population. And obviously when the three relative frequencies, if you add these three relative frequencies, they will give rise to 1. Okay, so it is assumed that these genotypic frequencies are the same for both males and females. Now if you check the relative frequencies of A and B allele, this is the relative frequencies of the genotypes in overall population. This FA1A2 or FA2A2, this is the relative frequency of the genotypes in overall population. Now if you consider the relative frequencies of the particular allele that we were talking about, that is A1 and A2, you can have this as P and Q. P is the relative frequency for A1 allele and Q is the relative frequency of A2 allele. Now in the same way, if you denote P and Q, you will see, so when the P plus Q, if we add this P and Q, these two frequencies of these two relative frequencies of these two alleles, you will get again 1. Now, Hardy-Weinberg principle is about the relation between the allelic and the genotypic frequencies. So, you have an idea, the allelic frequencies are P and Q, and the genotypic frequencies are all these relative frequencies F A1 A2, F A2 A2 or F A1 A2. So basically this is the relation between this allelic frequency and genotypic frequency. That is actually this Hardy-Weinberg principle tells us. What it states that if a mating is random, okay, in the population, and if the evolutionary forces of natural selection, mutation, migration, drifts, all of these events, these are absent, then in the offspring generation, the genotypic and allelic frequencies will be related by this formula. F1 FA1 A1 is equals to P square. That means the allelic frequency, the zygotic frequency of the genotypic frequency of this A1 gamete, that will be equals to that of the square of the allelic frequency of this A1 allele. If A1 is equals to P square. In likewise, if A1 A2, you can see that is equals to 2PQ, and if A2 A2, that corresponds to Q square, because the allelic frequency of A2 allele is Q. So this relationship is only valid when if the population the mating is a random one, and obviously different forces, evolutionary forces like natural selection, mutation, migration, genetic drifts, these are the factors that we already talked about, that it can actually have, and these all factors who actually have an effect on the evolutionary processes. So all these evolutionary forces, if they are absent, that is, it's an ideal condition, then there will be this kind of relationship between allelic frequency and the genotypic frequency. Now, random mating means the absence of a genotypic correlation between mating partners. What it means, that is the probability that a given organism mates with an A1 partner. For example, it doesn't depend on the organism's own genotype, and similarly for the probability of mating with a partner of one of the other two types. Now, the random mating will lead to genotypes to be in the above proportion, that is, I have already mentioned, the so-called Hardy-Weinberg proportions. So this is a consequence of Mendel's law of segregation. They are independent of each other. So since we are assuming the absence of selection, all parents, absence of selection means the natural selection, migration, genetic drifts, it's absence of all selection, all parents contribute equal numbers of gametes to the pool. So by the law of segregation, an A1 A2 heterozygote produces gametes bearing A1 and A2 allele in equal proportion. So therefore the relative frequencies of this A and B allele in the gamete pool will be the same as in the parental population, which is P and Q respectively. Again I am repeating, say that say A1 and A2, that is basically heterozygote. So it will produce two different allele. You can see A1 the one and A2 will be the other. Now there in the gamete there will be two different allele, A1 and A2. Okay, now this will be actually contributed in the gamete pool, and if there is no natural selection process or the no selection process, they will contribute equal in the pool. So the gamete pool, or the frequencies of the relative frequencies of this A and B allele in the gamete pool, that will be the same as in the parental population. So given that the gamete pool is very large, if we can consider, and we pick pairs of gametes from pool at random, say we will get ordered genotype pairs like A1 A1 is to A1 A2 is to A2 A1 is to A2 A2. These 4 genotypes in the P square is to PQ is to PQ is to Q square ratio. This is the particular ratio. Okay. Now, but this order actually doesn't matter. So we can regard the A1 A2 as A2 A1 etc. So pairs are equivalent. So giving the Hardy-Weinberg proportion for the unordered offspring genotypes. Now this simple derivation of the Hardy-Weinberg principle that deals with 2 alleles at a single locus, that the idea that I have shown you, that is about the 2 different or 2 alleles at a single locus, but it can be easily extended to multiple alleles. Importantly, whatever the initial genotype, genotypic proportion, random mating will automatically produce offspring in Hardy-Weinberg proportions for one locus genotype. So, if generations are non-overlapping, that is, parents die as soon as they have reproduced, okay, non-overlapping generations, just one round of random mating is needed to bring about Hardy-Weinberg proportions in the whole population. Now, if generations overlap, more than one round of random mating is needed. Now, once Hardy-Weinberg proportions have been achieved, they will be maintained in subsequent generations so long as the population continues to mate at random. And obviously, this is unaffected by evolutionary forces mentioned like selection, mutation, genetic drifts, and etc. So, the population then is said to be in Hardy-Weinberg equilibrium, meaning that the genotypic proportions are constant from generations to generations. And what is the importance of this Hardy-Weinberg principle? Because it depends on the fact that it contains the solution to the problem of blending that troubled Darwin. I have already mentioned the blending of traits. So actually Hardy-Weinberg tells us the solution about this blending, because as you can see that Jenkins argued that with sexual reproduction the variation in the population would be exhausted very rapidly, but the Hardy-Weinberg principle teaches us that this is not so. Sexual reproduction has no inherent tendency to destroy the genotypic variation present in the population, for the genotypic proportions remain constant over generations. That this is basically the assumption we have mentioned, that just because this is the characteristics or the traits are passed from one generation to other generation as a particle, as a discrete particle which is known as gene. So there is no chance of this destroying, no chance of this destruction of these traits. So that actually Jenkins told that there is a fast destruction, so there is no inherent tendency to destroy the genotypic variation, okay, in a particular population, and the genotypic proportions that will remain constant over generations. It is true that natural selection often tends to destroy variation and thus a homogenizing force, but this is a quite different matter. The blending objection was that sexual mixing itself would produce homogeneity even in the absence of selection, and the Hardy-Weinberg principle shows that this is untrue. Now, this is the one portion that, or this is the one problem that arose in the initiation of these evolutionary studies, or at the beginning of this population genetic section. This is the solution that we actually got from Hardy-Weinberg principle or Hardy-Weinberg derivations and all. Now another benefit of this Hardy-Weinberg principle is that it greatly simplifies the task of modeling evolutionary change. So when a population that is in Hardy-Weinberg equilibrium, it is possible to track the genotypic composition of the population by directly tracking the allelic frequencies. As you can see, the Hardy-Weinberg principle actually correlates the allelic frequencies with the genotypic frequencies, right? So if a population is in Hardy-Weinberg equilibrium, it is possible to track the genotypic composition of the population by directly tracking the allelic frequencies, or you can say gametic frequencies. Now that this is clear for if we know the relative frequencies of all the alleles at a single locus and know that the population is in Hardy-Weinberg equilibrium, the entire genotypic frequency distribution can be easily computed, the entire genotypic frequency. Now, with the population not in Hardy-Weinberg equilibrium, we would need to explicitly track the genotypic frequencies themselves, which is much more complicated. So, if you can say that a particular population is in Hardy-Weinberg principle, it will be very easy for us to find the allelic frequencies and the genotypic frequencies, because already the scientist showed us the relationship between these two frequencies. So this is about the population genetics. So whatever we have studied from the very first day of our evolution, we started about how can you define what is evolution, what evolution is, the definition of evolution, or the exact meaning of evolution, how the work gradually progressed, and next we talked about how this evolution is related with genetics, how they can be affected or they have impact on each other. From there we talked about different genetical traits and also different terms we generally used in genetics, like linkage, recombination, which are typical genetic terms, but we have already discussed that they have an immense impact on evolutionary biology also, right? And then from the genetics portion, we already talked about this linkage, recombination, linkage, disequilibrium, and from there we talked about this population genetics. So all of these evolutions and genetics, these are basically very interconnected topics. So if you want to study evolution, you should study the genetics. If you are studying genetics, gradually you will proceed towards these evolutionary history, and obviously this population genetics portion. So okay, in our previous one of the classes, I don't remember, I have talked about different softwares or web servers basically that were found to be used for this genetic inheritance pattern check. How will you understand to know how you can study these patterns of inheritance? We talked about this Mendelian inheritance in manner OMIM, or gene testing registry. I guess you remember this OMIM portion, or this online Mendelian inheritance. So in this OMIM, basically what we have talked that say this particular software or this particular database, this is a database. So this is tells us about a very comprehensive way, and it's a authoritative medium to know the human genes and genetic phenotypes that is freely available and updated regularly. And this say gene testing registry, which is actually provides a central location for this voluntary submission of genetic tests informations by the providers. It actually tells us about the scope of the test's purpose, the methodology, the validity, evidence, and obviously the test's usefulness and laboratory contacts and credentials. So if you can see, is my screen is visible to you all?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
This is basically the OMIM. This is the OMIM software basically that I have actually showed here, and you can see from here you can study. Say this is a Proteus syndrome. Now if you search in OMIM history, you will get the inheritance pattern. I have told that the dominant one or the recessive one, whether they are X-linked or autosomal. So this is a very basically somatic mutation, different growth pattern, and what are the different effects on head and neck, vascular system, skeletal, skin, nails, hair. These are the different effects of this particular disease. This is, you can know from this web server. Not only this, in case of Proteus syndrome, there are different drugs that can be used. They have already mentioned that different drugs and the related conditions also. So thus you can study the particular about a particular disease. You can search here, or this is basically the home page. This is actually the page, the Proteus syndrome. You will get the description, the clinical features here that were constantly actually submitted here, ages after ages. Okay, and this is basically the home page for this OMIM. This is the home page of OMIM. So you can actually search by clinical synopsis, or you can have these entries to search a particular disease. And in case of say the gene testing registry or GTR, this is actually shows, this is a particular paper. So for tuberous sclerosis, you will get the summary of the particular disease, the testing that I have mentioned, that it actually allows us to know about the testing, the usefulness of the testing, the methods, the different things, the laboratory conditions, etc. So you will get the diagnosis or testing. Okay, now the management and also the diagnosis, the suggestive findings, the major features, the minor features, and obviously how the diagnosis can be done. Okay, so and the clinical characteristics of this particular disease, what are different characteristics, what they can cause for different organs of our system, human system. This can actually we can be able to know about these different features of a particular disease using this GTR or gene testing registry. This is the home page of this gene testing registry, and I have searched here, displayed here, so you will get that this is basically a mental retardation. And now if you search here, you will just get the test name, the purpose of the test, the
Excuse me, ma'am.
Yes.
Sorry to interrupt you, ma'am. Only the PPT is visible. No homepage is visible.
Okay. Just wait then.
Ma'am, even for OMIM, the PPT was visible and not the homepage was visible.
So can you see it now? Is it visible now?
No, ma'am.
Yes or no?
No, ma'am.
No, ma'am.
Okay. Just check it if it is visible now.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so this is basically the home page of OMIM that I have mentioned, and this is, you can search here the clinical synopsis, and if you search, say in case of skeletal, this is what I got from the searching. Now if you search here, this is the, say I was talking about this Proteus syndrome, and this is the drug that can be used. You can search from these titles where these drugs were used. Now if you see, this as the this is the entry for skeletal. Now if you search, say Proteus syndrome, you will be able to see that there are like different, this is the first page. You will get the text, the description, or the clinical features that were actually submitted in this registry years after years. Okay, and now if you search about this say clinical synopsis, you will be able to find the inheritance pattern, whether it is recessive or dominant, X chromosome linked, or autosomal. This is a somatic mutation. You can see the growth pattern, the symptoms that actually include the neurologic symptoms, the symptoms on skins, nails and hair, etc. You can also study these. Okay, and same. Okay, so this is, and this is for the TGR, or sorry, the GTR, gene testing registry. This is, if you search the in gene testing registry, this is for, I have searched about tuberous sclerosis complex. So you will be able to find the summary, the clinical characteristics, what it causes, the diagnostics, the management, and obviously different levels of diagnosis, the features that you can find, different effects of this disease in say different organs of humans like skin, CNS, etc. Next, you will be able to find that what can be the different tests that can be done for all these positions. Okay, and if you see, this is thing that actually I have searched about this the dysplasia. Actually I have searched, and from the search term I got actually many hits, and from where I actually chose one, the autosomal dominant. So this is the mental retardation which is autosomal dominant one. Okay, and you will be able to know the gene that is responsible for this particular disease, its clinical traits, its conditions, and every single details. You can see that indications, different methodologies. This is the indication of this particular disease, the clinical features. Now if you see, click for methodology, you will get to know that different molecular different methods that is actually used for this to detect the particular disease, and you will get laboratory contacts and all. So this is basically the overview. So this is how actually this gene target registry and OMIM can be helpful for us to know about different genetic disorders, different genetic diseases, and because I have mentioned that these are two free softwares, and obviously these are like a very frequently used one. People are submitting in these wave servers regularly, and they are regularly being updated by people. So you can use this to know about different patterns of inheritance. Okay, so that's all for today. I guess I have clearly told you about the evolution and genetics portion. So do you have any problem or any query about the class?
No, ma'am.
Okay.
No, ma'am.